Okay, so we are kind of awkwardly doing like half a share, okay? Because I don't know if you remember the last Pirkei Avos share we had, we did Rambam on friendship, and the original plan was to do Rambam and Rabbeinu Yonah, but we ended up doing a much fuller analysis of the Rambam than I thought, and it was like I think it was 2 hours, I think, if I remember correctly, and it was very good. But then I was like, okay, we gotta wrap up this Mishnah. And then I wanted to do it the next week, and it didn't work. And then I wanted to do it the week after, or I didn't want to do it because it was in the cabin. So this is kind of like just a wrap up. It's just one of the mafarshim. So we'll might be a half an hour share, might be an hour share. We'll see. And we've already asked all the questions. So we'll review the questions and then we'll do Rabbeinu Yonah and just see where our analysis takes us. Okay, so 1-6, Yeshua ben Parachia Omer. So he says three things, but we're only focusing on the middle one. Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a teacher. Uknei lecha chaver, and acquire or literally purchase for yourself a friend. V'hevidan es kol ha'adam l'kav zechus, and judge every person favorably. Okay, so our questions were, looks like we had six. One, what does each verb mean? Aseh, make, and knei, acquire or purchase, and why is each one used in its clause? Furthermore, the opposite doesn't the opposite usually make sense? Meaning usually we say you should get a rav and you should make a friend. So do either of the verbs imply an answer to the how question, and to what extent? So all questions about the terminology, the verbs. Okay, two, why does it seemingly just say a friend without specifying what kind of friend? And you cannot just claim that friend automatically implies good qualities because the next Mishnah says, don't befriend a Russia. And the next chapter says you should get a Chaver Tov and avoid a Chaver Ra. So clearly, like, Chaver does not automatically imply good. Three, both clauses are stated in singular, but what's their meaning? Um, Meaning a friend or a Rav. We can see an argument for why you would only have one Rav, but presumably you should have multiple friends. So why not Knei Lecha Chaverim, friends? Or what's the Havamina, meaning what is the erroneous assumption we would be prone to making before learning this? Or in other words, duh, we can understand why the Mishnah would tell us to get a Rav, but why does the Mishnah need to tell us to get a friend? Um, Okay, five, who's the intended audience is seems like everyone needs this advice, but if Pirkei Avos is for leaders and or the chassid in training, someone who's going beyond the letter of the law, why does he really need to be told to get a rav and a friend? And then six, question two aside, question two was what kind of friend? Yeah, what qualities should or shouldn't this friend have? Are there specifications we care about, like gender, mitzvah observance, knowledge, etc.? Okay, so just we're not going to go into the Rambam again, but just to review the Rambam. Rambam said that there are three categories of friendship, and same disclaimer as before that the word friendship or friend in Hebrew or in, I don't know, non-English American Western culture is much broader or more fluid or all-encompassing than like I think what we say in English. Like in English, we said that there's like love and friendship, but in Hebrew, it seems to be like, you could talk about love, which is just like what we would say liking someone, and you could talk about friendship as like the highest level of relationship. So it's a much more fluid term. So don't get caught up in the terms here. Okay. So Rambam says there were three categories. There was a friendship of utility, a friendship of enjoyment, and a friendship of for the higher good. Friendship of utility is when the relationship basically is dependent on each person getting some sort of tangible, benefit. And if the benefit ceases, then the friendship dissolves. Second one is that the friendship is sustained by the fact that you get an enjoyment out of them. So there's two levels there. There's pleasure, which we said most friendships fall into and most relationships fall into. Like relationships between husband and wife, men and women is like you or just most of the people we call friends, you enjoy being with them. You enjoy their personality, their company, whatever it is. Um, and then the higher level though is a friendship of trust, where you like a confidant. You can completely confide in the other person. You don't have to worry about them betraying you. There's total trust, and so that's the highest level of that second one. And then the highest category is a friendship for a noble purpose or for the higher good. I've got what we translated it as, and that is where each of you is trying to assist the other in getting the good with a capital G for both of you. And we said that those friendships are the ones that the Mishnah is urging you to get, because you don't need to be told about the other two. And we also said that it's not, what do we call it? It doesn't have to be symmetrical. So, for example, you can have let's say a parent who you totally confide in. So for you, they are your 2B friendship, to level 2B, but they're not confiding in you, you know, or you can have um therapist, we said, is another example of that, or you can have like a Rav that is just giving you knowledge, or you can have a Rav who is also a confidant, or you can have a Rav who's also like helping you in other ways. Okay, so like that's basic overview of the Rambam, but listen to the 2 hour shir because that was a good shir. Okay, let's move on to Rabbeinu Yonah now. Okay, Rabbeinu Yonah says like this, and I think I've edited these translations. Okay, Knei Lecha Chaver. Lishlosha devarim tzarech adam tzarech ala chaver tov. So you need a good friend for 3 reasons. Now it sounds like he is going to make a classification like the Rambam, but just spoiler alert, he all 3 of the divisions of Rabbeinu Yonah are within the Rambam's 3rd category. So within the friendship of for a higher purpose or for the good, there are these 3. Okay, so one is ha'echad l'divrei Torah, is for words of Torah. Kamosha Amar, as he said, Harbe lamadati mirabosai umichavera yoser mirabosai umitamida yoser mikulam. I've learned much from my teachers, and from my friends more than from my teachers, and from my students more than all of them. I just had deja vu because I was like, wait, did we learn this already? And I realized, yeah, we did, because when we did Aselecha Rav, we compared that with this. So that's why it sounds familiar if it does. Okay. So you need a friend for Torah. Okay. 2, Vasheni lemitzvos. Second one is for mitzvos. She'af kishein chavero chasid mimeno, because even if your friend is not as pious as you are, upa'amim shegamhu ose asher lo kadas, and sometimes he even does something improper, kishehu nehene bedavar ose havera, when he derives enjoyment from something that is a transgression. Okay, I don't know why he has to. Oh, I know why he does that. I was gonna say, like, why doesn't he just say like when he transgresses? But when he derives enjoyment from transgression, okay, aval ein cheftzo uritzono shagavero yasena. So in other words, like, but his desire is not that his friend should commit the sin. Ein lo hana b'zeh. He doesn't have any pleasure in his friend committing the sin. Kumosh amru, as they say in Kiddushin, Samchim Amud Beis, ein adam chote v'lo lo. It's a little weird in the Hebrew, but a person does not sin for the benefit of another person. Okay, in other words, like, you sin for your own pleasure. You don't sin in most cases to make someone else happy if you're not getting any pleasure out of it. Im kain, if so, nimsa ki yochiach es chavero. So consequently, when he rebukes his friend, min haveros, from transgressions, the chavero yeshalem lo kapoalo, and his fellow pays him back in kind, meaning doesn't do an avera, but rebukes him. V'nimtzu shneim chozrim b'tshuva. So both of them will do tshuva. Kol echad al pi chavero. Each one based on the literally based on the word of his friend, but each one like prompted by his friend. Okay, so let's actually we'll stop and analyze each one as we go. So I think I don't want to say that the first one is self-explanatory, but we did talk about how we talked about the benefits of like learning with one of your peers, and how like it's different from learning from your Rav, in that like it's not like you are subordinate to their authority. You're both really coming at this as equals. So I don't feel like we need to talk about using your friend for learning Torah, because we dealt with that in other shirim. So unless there's some new point, I'm content with where we are there. But let's focus on the second one, is for mitzvos. Yeah. So what is the so what are the questions here, I guess, if we have any questions? Analysis. Yeah. What are the questions here? No questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So like how do they both benefit if one rebukes the other, right? So like
Yeah.
I don't totally get it. why both of them are, it's considered like they both did teshuva or something?
Okay, so what exactly is this, mutual benefit through rebuke that he's talking about? How does it work? Okay, what else? I mean, I have a question. I don't know if we have an answer. I mean, that was another preface I forgot to say, by the way, is I only prepared this year when I mentioned we were supposed to have this year like in mid-December. I prepared this in early December, so I have not looked back at this. So I can't even guarantee that we're gonna have any ideas, but we'll learn anyway. Another question I have, I remember that now because I don't think I asked this when I was preparing with my chavrusa. Um, is it really true that you only sin for your own pleasure, and not for someone else's? Uh, I mean, in other words, isn't part of peer pressure, um, caving and doing something you don't necessarily want to do, but you're doing it for the social reasons. In other words, like let's take an example of the classic example, drugs, right? Like you might not want to smoke cigarettes, but like if you're a cool, leather jacket wearing buddy with the greased hair is smoking, then like you might like engage in it not because you want to do the Avera, but because you don't want to like ruin the friendship, or you don't want to like, or you want to strengthen the friendship or something like that, you know? So like, is this even really true that you don't like, in other words, it seems like, I guess what I'm saying to ask the question even stronger is like, to the contrary, you know, um, friends friends can cause you to sin in ways that you wouldn't have ordinarily done, which is why that other Mishnah needs to warn you against having a bad friend. Okay,
I mean, I feel like it's not saying that,
what are you answering?
yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
so
what am I
let's hold
answering?
off the answers for now. Yeah, let's get all the questions first. Um, okay, are there any other questions? I mean, maybe that's it, but yeah, I have another question also, and this might be nitpicky, okay, but Rabbeinu Yonah starts off by saying, you need a friend for mitzvos, okay? But he only talks about sinning and rebuke, you know? Like, why the emphasis on the negative? And the only reason I really had this is there was another commentary that I didn't actually learn through. I just ChatGPT'd it just so I can like skim it. So this is the Yain Levanon, who's one of my new favorite Chumash commentaries, actually, Rav Naftali Hertz Wesley. So he says something in here. So he said, actually, he starts off by contextualizing it. He says, "Acquire for yourself a companion. This teaching is placed under the heading of on avoda." I don't know how he's learning this, by the way. I think maybe he's like lining it up with Aha Torah, Aha Avoda, Al Gemilus Chasadim. I think he's probably going, Al Lecha Rav is on Torah, and friendship is on Avoda, and Gemilus Chasadim is on judging everyone favorably. And it speaks of a completely righteous person who serves God out of both awe and love. That's all you need to do is just find a person like that. Okay, even so, oh no, maybe it's talking to that person. Even so, he should not rely on his own righteousness, but should fear lest he stumble. For this reason, it says, acquire for yourself a companion, not because the companion will instruct him in the laws of Avoda or teach him how to serve God, since Hartana is speaking about a wise person, as I already explained regarding make for yourself a teacher. Rather, here we go. He needs a companion to spur him on in the fulfillment of positive commandments and to warn him to turn away from evil. Okay. So he emphasizes both, right? Is you need a friend to like motivate you to do mitzvos, or push you to do mitzvos beyond what you would have done by yourself, and for warning you from Averos. And he says, okay, he warns about sins. Hold on. I think he says one more place also. Yeah, so he also says here, there's a great difference between a teacher and a companion. It is relatively easy for a person to make for himself a teacher because among many sages he can find one outstanding in wisdom who will instruct and judge matters for him. Nor will the sage refuse to serve as his teacher, since every Jew is obligated to place his fellow on the path of truth and guide him on the straight way. But it is exceedingly difficult for a person to find a companion who is aligned with his heart and soul. The term companion refers to companionship of souls, where one heart trusts the other and is equal to it, as in one man companions. I don't know what that is. Their hearts were unified and they acted with a single counsel. And similarly, she is your companion and the wife of your covenant. This is the type of relationship our Mishnah addresses, a companion who is of one heart with him. Such a companion is needed for all of one's actions and all of one's conduct, both in matters between himself and in his creator, and in matters between himself and other people. For in every practice and every deed, there is a path to good and a path to evil. So that again, that's another emphasis on the positive and the negative. One must reveal to him all his secrets and desires so that the companion may spur him towards good deeds and prevent him from stumbling into sin. Okay. So again, I'm just showing this here to show that, like, I don't think it's a crazy thing to say. Why does Rabbeinu Yonah say you need a friend for mitzvos, but then he only talks about Avera? And look, you can say, look, this is a little bit of a tricky methodology thing. So there are, and I don't mean to diss any Mefarshim here, there are Mefarshim who have a reputation for clarity and comprehensiveness, and whose silence speaks volumes. And then there are Mefarshim who play fast and loose. And then there are Mefarshim with a varied style. So, for example, Rambam is someone who you can assume that, like my Rabbi Moskowitz used to say what you mean and mean what you say. And if he doesn't say something, like, it means he's specifically not saying it. And like every single thing that he says, his exact wording is very, very, clear. And like, and intentional. Another example of this is Rashi on Chumash, is that Rashi is very, very careful. If he changes the words of a midrash, it's intentional. Like if he says, like, something in one order, like, you can be very exacting. Okay. But then there are other Mefarshim, again, no offense here, but like, like the Abravanel, who would write pages and pages and pages, and you kind of get the sense that like if you asked him, why did you include this sentence and not the other one, he'd be like, I couldn't stop writing, or like there are other people who just are very, Ralbag is sometimes very, very wordy, and like, or sometimes you get the benefit of seeing Mefarshim of multiple drafts. But then Rabbeinu Yonah is this interesting writer, because sometimes he writes like the Rambam, and sometimes sometimes it feels like you're reading his notes, So I don't know if this is a good question or not, but for me it stood out, so I'm asking it. Okay. Any other questions on this clause? It's also funny. I mean, even if your friend is not as pious as you. It's just funny, like he speaks of it as though like we all obviously have like the most pious friends. But yeah. Okay. All right, let's try and answer these questions now. So yeah, Rucha, you want to answer the second question?
I can't remember. I think something came up where I had something against question 2, but I need to
Okay.
think about it now. So
Okay, sure. So let me start. Sometimes it pays if you just start with obvious stuff. So let me try giving the obvious answer to the mutual beneficial rebuke thing, which is well, let me ask you, what do you think, like, what does he mean when he's describing this like relationship where each of you rebukes the other one? Like what's your understanding, and just in your own words, of how that type of dynamic works?
I mean, because you're friends, like, you know that you care for each other's well-being. So then if you see that something is bad for your friend, you tell them to not do it.
Okay,
Kind
yeah,
of.
right. I mean, so number one, first of all, um, it's clear that the rebuke is coming from a place of love, right? Your friend wants what's good for you. Now, ideally, you should think that about most people who rebuke you, but we know that, like, you know, I don't know, like if a a coworker rebukes you for something, who's not like who you don't have a relationship with, like maybe they're just like, I don't know, maybe it's office competition or whatever, or like, when a child is rebuked by a parent, there's a lot of other psychological dynamics that play in, or a student by a rebbe, but presumably if it's your friend, then you're going to be able to hear it. In other words, like you're going to be predisposed to being able to hear it with minimal resistance. Okay. What's another reason why a friend makes for a particularly good rebuke person, or rebuker? Rebuker's a weird, we don't have that word in English. I mean, we don't use it that much.
You also spend a lot of time together, and you
Right.
might be in situations where they're more tempted, and then you can step in, or vice versa.
Okay. So statistically, you spend a lot of time with each other, and you'll have opportunities um, to sin and to be rebuked, uh, and vice versa. Where you're doing that to them, right? Yeah, Alex.
Presumably, if someone is a close friend of yours, they know how to rebuke you in a way that
Okay.
will be like receptive to you.
Okay, that's also good, right? Is that since you know each other really well, then you'll know how and when and for what to rebuke each other uh, maximal effect. Right. I know that there are people who do feel uncomfortable, like even bringing stuff up to their friends. And I would say you got to get better friends. If you see your friend doing something that's self-destructive, and you're like, oh, maybe it's going to be awkward if I say something. That's not the type of friendship he's talking about here. I mean, that might be like a lower level friendship, which maybe you can make into something higher. But like, real friends tell each other, what needs to be said. Yeah. I think there's another one also, um, which is like, maybe this kind of encompasses everything else, but like, you can have a buddy system agreement, where this is a um consciously acknowledged part of the relationship. Like I think most rebukes come in a manner that is sometimes perceived as like out of the ordinary, out of nowhere, or um like I don't know, like it's different. If maybe what's another example of this? Let's say like if you are, I never really played team sports, but I imagine that if you are on a team with someone and you're training with them and you're practicing, it's just like a known thing that you're going to make certain agreements about, like, if you see me like, doing this technique poorly, or making these consistently bad decisions, like you're gonna call me out on it, and like we'll help each other in that way. Or if you have like a workout buddy, then you'll make sure that both of you stay in line, So like it could be like an explicit part of the relationship. So I think that's another thing. Um, and I had one more idea. Oh, another thing also is like, I think doing an Avera, sorry, doing an Avera in private, um, is a lot easier to rationalize than doing an Avera, with your friend's knowledge. In other words, uh, I think there is more. I mean, sorry, let me do this. Than doing an Avera with someone else's knowledge, especially a friend. So like I just think having this be part of your values, having rebuke be part of your value system will just, stop so many sins at nip so many sins in the bud. Um, Now, I'll give you an example of this, of just what I've heard. I've never really been in a situation like this, but like, I know that there are people who have like two groups of friends. Like they'll have their more religious friends and they'll have their less religious friends. And like, it's much easier when you're with your less religious friends to like lower your guard, Whereas if you surround yourself with people who have the same values in halacha, then it's much easier to keep it up. So I think just like having that as your social group is just going to deter you from so many things. Okay, so Rivka, I don't know if there was more to your question or if you were just inquiring like what is it, how does this work practically? But does this answer it, or did you have more that you were bothered by? Oh no.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I am still bothered by it, just like the phrasing of it, that there's mutual benefit. Like I get it, if you care about your friend, you want them, to be well and not transgress.
Yeah.
So, but that almost is like a little selfish. Like that doesn't bring you to teshuva, you know what I mean? Some people like rebuking others and making themselves feel like, oh, I'm helping, etc. Whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's why I think it does have to be mutual in order for this to work. In other words, okay, I should this should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway, is that both of you do have to be on board with the idea that the life of Torah and mitzvos is ultimately for your benefit. You're not keeping mitzvos for God. You're doing it, God gave us mitzvos l'tov lach, like Moshe Rabbeinu says, that it's for our benefit. And when we do averus, it actually harms us in this world. You don't even need Olam Haba for this, even though it's also true in Olam Haba. And then that mitzvahs are the best life for you in this world. So like when you are, again, using the cigarette example, like if your friend started smoking, you would be concerned because they're harming themselves and you care about them and you would want them to point out if you're doing something that's harmful for yourself. And so if both of you are operating in that framework about mitzvos, then you'll be like, I heard you speak lashon hara about someone, and like, not only is that usher, but like, if you get this reputation as lashon hara speaker, no one is going to want to be your friend. You're going to create conflict that you're going to have to suffer the results from. You're going to expose yourself to retaliation. You're going to distort your way of thinking about other people. You're going to be stoking your own ego. All of the Mishleic reasons to not speak lashon hara, and if so you're doing it because you want your friend to not be subject to those consequences. And the mutual aspect is that you want them to do that with you also. So, yeah, it's true that there are some people who like feeling holier than thou. And if that's the dynamic, then I don't think you should, try striking this balance with that friend. But we're talking about people who actually do have this relationship where you do view learning as, you do view mitzvahs as the best life. So I mean, I have to assume that's what he's talking about here, because otherwise, in other words, either he's talking about where you're doing it for the right reasons, or there's no purpose in him saying this. So I assume that everyone's in the same framework here. That's my assumption.
Yeah, no, that makes sense if it comes to mitzvot. I guess frequently, like somebody's correcting you, it's not like they're not always thinking of the mitzvah, but I guess in this context it is specifically like somebody's thinking of a mitzvah.
Yeah, and again, I think it's important to realize that this is built on a foundation of a friendship. This is not talking about you're going up to someone in shul and like being like, by the way, like you shouldn't XYZ, or like someone like keeping up with the Joneses about like who's more strict on a certain halacha. Like this is in a friendship. So I assume that's what he means. Okay, Rachel, did you remember what was bothering you about question two?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
I feel like even if you are doing something for peer pressure, it is still ultimately a self-preservation tactic. Like you care that you will be outcast, so you
Hmm.
do the thing. So it's not like you said, mm, one second, meaning you're still doing it for yourself and not for someone else, even though it
Okay.
might seem like
So
you are.
that is definitely a viable route. In other words, that when he says a person doesn't sin for someone else's pleasure, and I said, what about in order to maintain the friendship? And you don't want to do the thing. Yeah, you don't want to do the thing, but you're still sinning for the pleasure of the friendship. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
right.
like you're still the one who doesn't want to do it.
Yeah,
That's
right. Okay. So in other words, even when you're caving to peer pressure, you're doing it for your own pleasure, not not the pleasure of the sin, but the pleasure of the friendship. Okay.
right.
So I still though think in order to answer the question, you have to answer how is like how can the Rabbeinu Yonah seemingly just like ignore this dynamic? But I think what I just said to Rivka, I think is the answer to that, which is that
Right.
right, is that we're not talking about people who are um uh not devoted to the life of Torah and mitzvos here. Um, I think what I'm getting here is Rabbeinu Yonah seems to be assuming that this Mishnah is directed to someone who is, minimally so I guess at least on board, if not a chassid in training, right? Like the standard uh audience of Pirkei Avos, So like even and maybe this is why he says even if his friend is not as pious as he and he sometimes does averos, in other words, like we might not even be talking about the average Jew. I shouldn't say the average Jew, but like a I don't want to be insulting here. A Jew who is not fully on board with halacha, and the way I say it is like, Kohelet says there's no person who's so righteous that who's only righteous and never sins, but there are people who basically like are trying to keep halacha in writ large, and then there are people who are not, like they'll keep halacha here and they won't, like this is kind of an extreme example, but a friend of mine told me that like someone who he went to high school with like puts on tefillin every day and says Shema, but like nothing else. Like, like I don't think we're talking about that kind of person. Like that person is not on board with halacha. That person, it's nice that they do a mitzvah, but like that type of person is not going to have a buddy relationship where they're a buddy system where they're like trying to rebuke each other. Yeah. Okay. So I think that answers this question. Okay. And 3, why only focus on the negative? Why not the positive? And again, I don't know if this is a real question, but can we, yeah,
I had some thoughts.
sure.
I feel like kind of going off the same thing, like people do things for their own benefit. So when it comes to mitzvos, I don't know if this makes sense, but we'll see. When it comes to mitzvot that are positive, like someone might have the mindset of, oh, this is good for me. I don't necessarily need so much influence or whatever,
Yeah, right.
or prompting. But then when it comes to sinning, the person also thinks this is good for me. That's why they do it. Like
Oh, okay.
someone is tempted to sin because they think there's a benefit to it, so they need someone to
Okay, that's a nice
prompt
answer.
them the other way.
That's a conceptually nice answer. Okay, so in other words, people are seeking their own good. Um, and so since we're talking about someone who is on board with halacha and views Torah and mitzvos as a good, they don't need the prompting to be engaged in mitzvos. However, what gets them in trouble is that the avera will masquerade as this is for your own good. And that's why you need a friend to protect you. All right, I really like that conceptual unity there. All right, that's good. Okay, I think this answers that clause. So unless anyone has anything else, we'll move on. We can obviously go back if need be. But let's go on to the next clause. The third reason. Vashlishi, the third reason you need a friend is inyan ha'etza, is for advice. Or counsel. Shikachenu lios lo meir la'azor b'chol inyanav, that he take him as one who will give him a meir, insights and to help him in all of his affairs. Of lakachas mimen etzatovin, to take good advice from him. Lioso ben sodo, and to be a confidant. Achar hayoso bivrisimo, once he has entered into a covenant with him. Of lo yigalenu la'acherim, and to not reveal his confidence, his secret to another. Laval Yafru Machshavto, Yaferu, I don't know how to say that, and to not thwart his plans. Not even to those who appear as friends. Kitsuras ha'ava nikeres al paneim, for the appearance of love is evident on their faces. Alav Amar Shlomo, Alav Shalom Hafer Machshavos Bein Sod Uberov Yotim Takum. Okay, so regarding this, Shlomo said, plans are frustrated where there is no counsel, but through many advisors they are established. Oh, you know what I didn't do? Hold on. Mishlei 15:22. Looky here. I gave Mishlei on this. Oh, this is a morning Mishlei one, so I don't have the translation. Okay, so what I did was, whenever this is a good thing about Rabbeinu Yonah. Whenever you see Rabbeinu Yonah quote Mishlei in Pirkei Avos, you should look up his commentary on Mishlei because it's a good commentary. So let's translate this commentary on Mishlei here. Hafer machshavos be'ein sod uvro yotim takum. So what is that? So I'll translate it here. He might modify the translation, but plans are, I like saying thwarted. Thwarted where there is no counsel. Okay, so what does he say? Hafaras machshavos ye'arav yekra be'ein sod. So plans are, I guess, the thwarting of plans. The thwarting of plans happens and occurs. See, this is an example, by the way, of how Rabbeinu Yonah is not quite as exact as the Rambam. If the Rambam said ye'arav yekra, used two words, I'd be like, why does he say two words? But like Rabbeinu Yonah, like he does that all the time. Happens and occurs without counsel. Ki kasher yigaleh adam sodo, for when a person reveals his secret, yagid hashomea le'echav, the listener will tell it over to his brothers and his friends. Uvein ish navon yevada larabim. Uvein ish navon? I don't know why that makes any sense. And you know what I'm going to do? Hold on. I want to check the authoritative version of Rabbeinu Yonah. Mishlei, let's see if I have it. What is this 15:22? The Torah's Chaim Mishlei is better than the one on All Torah. Let's see here. Okay. Hafaras machshavos yerav yikra be'ein sod. Ki kasher yigale adam sodo. Yagi hashmei le'achav u'lamarehu uvein. Oh, okay, good. See, you got to go with your intuition if you have good intuition. This is maybe a scriptural, manuscript error. Ulai tzarich ube'ein, and without. Yeah. So and ube'ein, and without. I'm going to just stick with this. And without ish navon, I don't know if you without or in the if there is no person of understanding, I think it's yivada larabim. It will be made known to the public. V'ipol davar sheyiskakem echad ha'am levatal ha'inyahu shlo yagil l'maisa. And one of the people is going to try to strategize and to thwart the matter from coming about. So in other words, I'm just going to summarize. Summary of Rabbeinu Yonah. So in other words, if you reveal your secret to someone who is not trustworthy, word will get out, and someone who is, and there's a good possibility that someone will try to stop you, okay, for their own reasons. Okay, then he says, Uvarov yoatzim takum hamachshava. So with a multitude of advisors, then the plan will persist, will prevail. Hodia hasiba lahafaras hamachshava. So Shlomo is making known the cause of the thwarting of the plan, vasiba lahakabasa, and the cause of bringing it to fruition. Keep hastir hasod. If you conceal the secret of ein yoatzim, and there are no advisors, afal pi shelo garam es hafarasa, even though you won't cause its thwarting, od lo higia l'sabif kamasa, you also might not bring it to fruition. Sod eitza shnei inyanim heim. So sod and eitza are two different concepts. Kia sod haster davar. Sod means you're concealing the matter. Eitza chakira sadeos alha davar. And eitza is you're investigating. So let me actually just look and see what we came up with in Shiur. So I said in the summary, there's a tension between the secretive nature of plans and the need for good advice. Seek good advice from the people who will not let the secret out, and make sure that you're thinking about both qualities, their trustworthiness in keeping secrets and their qualifications in that area of advice when seeking advisors. Let me just summarize this here in our document. So sorry, Yona. Yeah. Okay, so in other words, if you put this back into the Pirkei Avos, so it turns out that you need a friend who is going to give you feedback and advice in general, but also, according to this Rabbeinu Yonah and according to Mishlei, then there are going to be certain things that you need to talk out with someone, because if you don't talk it out, you're not going to get the best advice on how to implement it. But if you talk it out with the wrong person, it could backfire, and it'll come about, and it'll thwart the plan. So you need someone who's like capable of doing both, who can help you but not betray you. So you need a confidant for that. So it's very interesting, the difference between. Oh, we didn't finish reading yet. There's more Rabbeinu Yonah. One more paragraph. I know I'm going to say this before I forget it. It's different. What's the difference for those of you who remember Rambam or heard my summary just now? What's the difference between the Rabbeinu Yonah's role of confidant and the Rambam's role of confidant? I'll put this here. Right, because actually, let's just reread the Rambam. Yeah, because I just like reading it so much. Rambam on friendship, even though I summarized it. Rambam says, so this is level 2b. So Rambam's friendship level is, whoops. Oh, here we go. Yeah. This is the translation. I forgot I put it in an outline. A friend of enjoyment has two subcategories: a friend of pleasure and a friend of security or trust. A friend of pleasure is like the friendship of men and women in marriage and other similar things. So that's like most friendships. A friend of security is that a person has a friend whom his mind or psyche relies on, and he doesn't withhold anything from him, neither deed nor speech, and he reveals to him all his affairs, the good and the bad, without worrying that any disgrace will come from him. Not from him, meaning the friend, nor from anyone else. When a soul has such a high level of trust in another, he will enjoy tremendous satisfaction in his conversation and friendship. So you would call that a confidant. What's the difference between that confidant and Rabbeinu Yonah?
I mean, it seems like Rabbeinu Yonah is more like practical, like you need it for advice and for what to do.
Okay, yeah. And how would you characterize the Rambams?
Maybe just like for psychological relief, or like in order to have a place where you can, yeah.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, Alex?
I just have a question. Is the implication that this kind of friendship inherently wouldn't be happening between like two spouses?
For
clarity.
So we addressed that in the Shiur and the Rambam, and so if I remember correctly, then what we said is that the ideal. Let me go back to the Rambam for a second. I promise you, this is not going to lapse into a Shiur on the Rambam again, even though that was even though I love talking about this Rambam, but we mentioned in the Rambam that the highest level of a marriage is a friendship for a noble purpose, where you're both assisting each other in doing the good. That would be the Ezer Kenegdo par excellence. Okay. Unfortunately, most of humanity doesn't have that. Okay. So most of humanity, just statistically, why do you get married to someone? Why do most people marry someone? Because they get along or they enjoy some pleasure from them, And so most people are going to have that. And unfortunately, lowest common denominator, I think statistically, most marriages are going to be in terms of they enjoy each other's company, or they enjoy, each other romantically, sexually, psychologically or whatever. And then the lowest level, which is also, I think, for most of humanity, is it's a relationship of convenience. I think for most of we have this like, obviously everyone here was poisoned by Disney, right? Is that like, that this idea of like romantic love being something that is like an essential thing. But that's like a very new idea and is not a Jewish idea as like a baseline. I mean, it's great if you can have that, but like, but that's not the Jewish idea of a relationship is you're striving for the good. but not the romance. But most marriages were like a utility thing. So to answer Alex's question, I mean, I I don't know statistically if like turning to your spouse as a as confidant is again statistically. I don't know if that's like the in the majority. I think that's a minority. Um, and again, you got to think of all human beings here. I just don't think that that's the role that people have. So the answer is yeah, ideally that'd be great, but that's not. I don't think that's statistically how it is.
So you're saying that when Rambam wrote this, he was thinking about all of humanity and just like categorizing it as that.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't giving statistics, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, he was giving statistics here. I think pleasure is he is definitely giving that as an example here. I think that's where our question came up of why wouldn't he give the relationship of marriage of the highest level? And he's saying because he's just talking about most people. Yeah. Um, okay. So yeah, so let's just put this here. So here's how I would say it is Rambam's confidant is um is is a category of or is a subcategory of friendship of enjoyment, whereas Rabbeinu Yonah's is a practical component within friendship for a noble purpose. Okay, Rambam would also say that your friendship for a noble purpose um uh can have this quality, I guess would be aided um, by this quality, but he's not specifying the functions within that highest level of friendship. In other words, Rambam just says a friendship for a higher purpose. You help each other for the good. But if you ask the Rambam, well, tell me the functions within that. That's not what the Rambam is aiming at. Rabbeinu Yonah is doing that, which leads me to ask another question, which we didn't ask, which is, um, oh, actually, well, I guess this is a question, which is, I'll ask this at the end, which is, um, are these the only three functions within a good friend? Okay. If so, if not, why doesn't he mention the others? Okay, so we'll return to that after we read the last paragraph because we haven't read it yet. Okay, so last paragraph of Rabbeinu Yonah. Hold on, let me just. Oh, there's two more paragraphs. Sorry, I forgot I divided this up. Yeah, Rivka.
Okay, so I just wanted to like mention, the part that like the Rambam says it's marriage is for pleasure or friendship, like there's like obviously there's tension also in marriage. It's like you live with somebody, there's always going to be tension,
Right.
but with a friend you don't live with necessarily, or you might, but there's like a lot more space and people can discuss things that they're not like feeling
Yeah,
as confrontational about or
that's true.
whatever. Yeah.
Yep, that is definitely true, right? Is that that I think I mean I might have said this in the Rambam Shiur, but I think like even the healthiest marriage, each person needs a best friend that they could talk to outside of the marriage and also even about the marriage. Like I think that I cannot see how a person would be able to function healthily in a relationship without someone they could talk with outside of that relationship. So just like a good relationship in marriage, you're going to need someone to talk to if you have an issue with your friend. Like okay. So there were apparently many more paragraphs, not many more, several more that I forgot. So he says, now he moves on to why it says acquire. So umash amar uknei lecha chaver. The reason why it says acquire for yourself a friend, b'lashon kniya in the language of acquisition, she'im lo yimtze'enu b'chinam is that if you don't find one for free, yikachenu b'kaspo, then you should acquire him with money or using money. V'yivazvez nechasav and expend your possessions k'dei lahasig ala chaver tov to attain a good friend. I think Rama mentioned that point also. O sheyiknehu b'fius devarim uvelashon racha, or you should acquire him not through money, but by appeasing him with pius devarim. Uh, ChatGPT said conciliatory speech. I don't know, conciliatory. Um, uvlashon racha, and gentle speech, below yakpid b'dvarav, and not be exacting on his words, like being picky, v'yispol imrei piu, and you should tolerate or bear what he says. Af kishiyomar davar kenegdo, even when he says something against you, al yeshivehu mana, don't respond, don't like a retort. She'im lokain, because otherwise lo yishar imo ba'ava, then he will not remain with you in love. Shadeos chalukosein, because now I don't know if deos here means minds or opinions. Opinions differ, or like dispositions differ. Upami mivakish davar, sometimes you'll want something, v'oavo kanafsho, and your best friend ra'azeh of yomer lechavero lo yichshar beinai. Your best friend will say that's not proper in my eyes. V'im lo yisbelehu v'yavirehu al kopanim, and if you don't tolerate that and overlook it, lo tipared hachavila, then the bond will dissolve. Yeah, really.
I can't remember if we asked this regarding Rambam, but I don't really understand the idea of like acquiring a friend with money, like the first part of
Yeah.
this, because especially the kind of friendship that they're discussing is supposedly of a very like high caliber, and to say like you can get a friend like that through appeasing them by like spending money on them seems kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I think that is worth asking about again. Um, Hold on. I just want to ask, I think we have to ask two questions that we've already discussed. The other question is, to what extent should you tolerate his speech and not say anything?
Oh, also,
Yeah.
like, is he saying against him, like against his opinion, or like against him, like
Yeah,
antagonistically?
I first read it, I thought it was antagonistic, but then the example he gives is,
Right. I feel like,
yeah. So I think it's that. Yeah,
right.
right. So I think we asked both these questions for the Rama, but I think they're worth answering again. So I'm going to go ahead and just give the same answer, and then if it doesn't work, then you could tell me. So I think say he must be talking. Sorry, he must be talking about the initial cultivation of the relationship. Like um people have limited time, energy, bandwidth, friendship slots, um, friendship slots, and and not to exclude Racheli here, but you're still in high school, and one of the rude awakenings that you'll find, maybe not right after high school, but maybe after seminary, maybe after probably in college, but like even in seminary, like people who are in high school kind of are around the same people by default for most hours of the day, in seminary also. But like there is a thing where you get to a certain stage in life and you realize that friendships don't automatically last, and you don't automatically have friendships that are made. And I feel like I've read this a lot, that one of the problems in adulthood that people are facing is like there are not, in the world we live in now, there are not as many opportunities for adults to like make new friends. It's like very hard. So like um an example of this I think that would be good is, let's say you have a new let's say your family moves, okay, and you're in a new community, right? So it's nice if people invite you over for, let's say, Shabbos meals, right? But it's probably worth it if you host other people and you're expending money, not because you're buying friendship with money, but because you're creating a scenario in which a friendship can organically develop based on shared values, or same thing with appeasing someone with words, like look, the best analogy is like dating, like no one behaves on their first dates in exactly the same way that they're going to behave when they're married. It just wouldn't form. The relationship wouldn't form. You have to put up your best front. You have to like, try to appeal to the other person's personality. And you can say, well, isn't that not genuine? Yeah, it's not genuine if that's the entire substance of your relationship. But if you're trying to forge a relationship, so then that's how it has to start. And then you have you are able to be more natural with each other and then like find each other's values and then you can have the relationship, you know? So I think that's like the kind of vibe that he's saying here.
That makes sense. I
Yeah.
get it.
So people have limited time, energy, and bandwidth, friendship slots, and you need to create opportunities um, for for genuine friendships to emerge. And what was I gonna say? And the Chiddush is even at a cost, you know. Um, and you know, it's funny because like I feel like everyone has their price point or everyone has areas that they would or would not do. So for example, like some people would not host meals. Like that's too much. Like I'm gonna like, you know, expand my food budget by like expensive amount, you know, like a large amount of money to like host Shabbos meals. Like that's too far, you know. Other people like, you know, but I would give gifts, you know. Other people would be like, well, you know, like I'll give gifts and I'll host people, but I'm not gonna compromise my personality in any way. Like I'm not gonna like you know like make small talk, you know. So like everyone has their area where they're like not willing to like incur a cost. And what he's saying is it's an investment. You have to invest at some cost in order to get this life-changing benefit. So I think that's the advice there. Okay, and then to what extent should you tolerate speech and not say anything? Can this be a toxic dynamic? So the way I would say this here is, and I'm going to put this in provocative terms here, is, is you can't create, you know, I guess friendships cannot survive cancel culture. Okay, and you see that this happens now where whether it's, I mean, it's mostly going to be political, but like how many people do you know where people were friends for many years and then within the last like 6 years, let's say, one person adopts a political opinion that the other person considers to be like the you know all evil, and then they stop talking to each other, you know, like it's unfortunate. But you know, I'm gonna actually stop the recording for 1 second. Um, um, so I think that's what he means when he says that minds differ, and you're gonna need to overlook it, and you're gonna need to be willing, like you're you will not agree on everything. Like even people who value the good are not going to agree on all the particulars. So you need to be able to, you know, your friend might make a decision that you actually think is wrong. And look, it's always a question of how far are you willing to go. And like another example of this is like sometimes you will think that your friend is marrying the wrong person, you know, and you should be able to like talk about it, but like you can't break up the friendship because of that. And look, again, it's very difficult. Like, let's say, like, look, I know other people who, you know, their friend, you know, gets involved in addiction, you know, and like, there's a fine line between, well, I need to support my friend and not terminate the relationship just because they're making really bad choices. But then sometimes you need to do that in order to benefit the other person. I think the main guiding principle has to be what the Rambam said, which is that the basis of the friendship has to be doing what is good for both of you. And sometimes you need to be able to tolerate what your friend is doing when they make bad choices. But sometimes breaking off the friendship is for the sake of their benefit. Yeah, really.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like a lot of times people like put a lot of value into like a lot of opinions, and I feel like in life there's certain stuff that are just not so like crucial that if you disagree it's gonna change everything.
Yeah,
And it's very important to be like, okay, maybe this is where I'm like hard stop, like I can't reconcile maybe this extreme whatever.
yeah,
But for a lot of stuff, it's important to be able to just say, okay, we disagree, and that's not going to change our friendship.
yeah, exactly. So just to distill that into a line, you have to think about what hill you want the friendship to die on. You know, like you know that there are, you could make everything into a hill to die on, and like I just don't think that you're going to be able to sustain the friendship. And but there are things that you will have to do that, you know. I think. Okay, let's go on to the last paragraph. Yeah, this is the last paragraph of Rabbeinu Yonah. So then he says, "V'zehu shamar Shlomo alav shalom." This is what Shlomo meant when he said, "Mechase pesha mavakesh ahava v'shoma b'davar mafrid aluf." If that sounds familiar, it's because if you're in my Monday night Mishlei year, we did this a couple weeks ago or a month ago. He who covers an offense seeks love, but one who repeats a matter separates close friends. I forgot if that's how Rabbeinu Yonah translated. I have our notes here in a second. Ratzalomar, meaning to say, Hamachase, one who covers up Kishiyivsha Chavera when his friend wrongs him. I don't know if it's wrongs him or just does wrong. Mivakesh Ava seeks love. Ki alzet iskaim ahavasam kishiyas bol pshav. For their love endures when he bears his friend's offenses. V'shona b'davar, but one who repeats a matter. Im chavera omer davar kenegdo, when his friend has spoken against him. V'chozer oso v'omer, and he goes back and repeats it and says, Ru'u ma maf. I think this got messed up. Ru'u ma. Oh, yeah, this looks like the text got messed up here. Yeah, hold on. Do I have? No, I don't. What did I write? Uma Mafrid Aluf Alkol Amar Ploni Uma. Yeah. Okay, I don't know what this is trying to say, but what I did was I copied the Rabbeinu Yonah from Mishlei. So let me just read the Rabbeinu Yonah there. A person who seeks to acquire loved ones and friends will cover over his fellow's offenses and overlook what is due him. In this way, his loved ones and friends will increase. But one who is exacting about a matter, this refers to a punctilious person who takes offense even at his fellow's words if the matter was not measured exactly according to his liking or honor. He repeats the matter saying, such and such you said, in order to accuse him about it and complain against him. Such a person separates from a confidant, separates a confidant, and all the more so he will not find people who love him if this trait is found in him. For there's no person who will not err in some matter, since human intellect and attentiveness are not complete in weighing all of one's words. Consequently, if he is exacting about his fellow's words, when they err with respect to his honor or his wishes, companionship, friendship, and love will not continue with him. This is the meaning of aloof, is a faithful and trustworthy friend. So we summarized it in Monday Mishlei here, saying, this is talking about how to win or lose friends. If you overlook the personal offenses of others, you will be loved by them. But if you are a cop down, someone who's like constantly harping on people's mistakes, even when no actual harm comes to you, even if they just didn't treat you the way you felt you ought to have been treated, then not only will you not gain friends, but you might even lose your friends. And so we said the question is, what mistake is this guy making, thinking that he won't lose him friends, or that it might win him friends? And we answered, at its root, this guy views friendships as being all about him and his feelings and his ego and his standards. There's no room for friendship with egotistical people. You need to be able to identify with the other person and empathize with them and cater to them in a sense. So if you can't do that, the friendships aren't possible. So that, I think, goes back to the cancel culture point from before, is that you can't let ego. See, this is an interesting thing. Let me just do an analysis bullet point here. Is a friendship for the good can't be based on ego. You have to set aside ego for the higher value that the friendship is based on. So practically speaking, you'll have to tolerate blows to your ego, to a certain extent, and in order to maintain the friendship. Now, I think the interesting thing here is you got to remember, this is against a backdrop of mutual rebuke. Okay, so presumably each friend will discuss this with their friend once the friendship is solidified. So in other words, at the beginning of the friendship, then you might need to like overlook certain things and not mention certain things. But once you have the dynamic going, then you'll definitely, look, it's a confidant, so you can trust them. You're opening up to them. You're also rebuking each other. And certainly v'ahavta l'recha kamocha is something that like, or onas devarim is like saying things that hurt people, like, or embarrassing people in public. You're going to need to rebuke them if they say something that hurts you. And like any relationship is going to have, you're going to have fights in any relationship, at some point. And so I think that's what he's saying here. Okay, so I do want to answer that last question that I asked, which is, I'll just put it here, which is, are these really the only three categories of function in the highest level of friendship? Okay, so they are learning, mitzvos, and advice. Can you think of any others? And the trick here is mitzvos is pretty broad, right? Because mitzvos is going to mean that you're going to reinforce keeping halacha with each other, and halacha is really like encompasses a lot of stuff. I mean, it does seem pretty, yeah, Rivka?
Well, like just common interests and stuff.
So that's the question, right? Is like you need common interests for the Rambam's friendships of enjoyment, but you need common interests for a friendship of this level, other than learning mitzvos and what do you call and advice. I'm not convinced that you do. And I'll give you an interesting example of this is that there are people who I'm just going to give this as an example, just out of the blue here. You can have someone who is, let's say, nowadays we have the luxury to be able to have like long distance relationships where you're not really like living in the same area as the person. You can have a relationship between a Haredi person who is like secluded and a modern Orthodox person, you know, and the modern Orthodox person is going to movies and going to sports games and like listening to music and stuff like that, and the Haredi person is not, but they help each other in mitzvos, they help each other they learn in Torah and they give each other advice. I don't know if you need common interests. Maybe you need common interests or not need. Maybe common interests can be an asset in forming the relationship, but I don't know if you need it as part of this relationship. I'll give you another example. I mean, like, we said, I gave an example, like my relationship with my Rebbe, with Rabbi Moskowitz, was on the highest level, but we didn't have common interests other than learning mitzvahs and advice. So it's not like we like, watch the same movies or listen to the same music or play magic. Yeah, Raquel?
I mean, I wouldn't say this is common interest like sharing hobbies or whatever, but
Yeah.
I feel like the highest level of friendship should include a sort of like just appreciation for the person themselves, like that you just have, yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing. Let me put that. So
Like
perhaps
I don't, Martin Buber's like I thou or I it like
I've
relationship
only
thing.
heard that quoted. I've never actually read it or studied it, so I don't really know.
Okay, I haven't
Yeah,
like studied it in depth,
yeah.
but like just this idea of like, do you see someone as something from which to get value or a person who you just
Okay,
appreciate as their own self?
an appreciation. So doesn't the highest level of relationship involve some recognition, appreciation of of the friend as a person? Yeah. So actually, I'm going to put this as part of the question here. So what I would answer is yes, but that's not a function of the friendship. Um, it's a beneficial outcome. Like in others, I think in others, like I
Or
think that.
maybe,
Let me just finish this thought. I
yeah,
think the friendship that meets these these criteria, you will naturally form this type of love and appreciation and respect for each other. And I would argue that it's going to be even deeper than a psychological friendship, because here you recognize the person as a Tselem Elohim and as a free will chooser, and as you're recognizing their soul, like not just like their personality. So so the answer is yes, this is part of the relationship, but it's not a function. It's not that you're seeking that out, as a function. I think.
right. Maybe it's more of just a feature of a friendship
Yeah,
that,
it's a feature, right?
yeah.
Right, it's a feature. Yeah, I think that's good. But I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something that is important here. Okay, so I think again, this was a short shear by design. That, as you can tell from how much we referenced the Rambam, you can see how like I think really the Rambam and Rabbeinu Yonah need to be learned together, because the Rambam maps out the topic, the sugya of friendship, and then Rabbeinu Yonah double clicks on that like third category, and then does the drop down menu into like what does that consist of, and how do you go about doing it, and now I think we have the full picture. So. That is yeah, Rivka.
I just wanted to add like loyalty, like a sense of like loyalty to your friend, because like people can do Torah, learn Torah together, they can do mitzvah, they can have all of that, but then they can just be like, oh, I'll just do all of that and forget about my friend. Like nothing is really stopping. There's behalf to their halacha, but just being like real with people and and
Right.
genuine.
Right. So I think that's exactly what Rabbeinu Yonah was talking about in the third category when he mentioned the function of advice, but he says that you should. I was just going to read it in Hebrew because I think it's better in Hebrew. Shikachenu lihios lo meir le'ezor b'chol inyan. You should take this person as someone to give you insight or feedback in all of your affairs. Lakachas b'min eitzah tova, and take good advice. V'lios ben sodo, and be a confidant. Achar heyos bivrisimo, and to be enter into a covenant with him. Which again, that's not modern language, but like a covenant is loyalty. I mean, like loyalty, trust. I got your back, you got my back. Not to reveal his secrets to others lest they thwart his plans. It shouldn't be someone who just seems like a loved one, but should actually be a loved one. So I think that he's assuming that loyalty in that quality there. He's just bringing it in as a something in service of the advice. But I think it is going to be a quality that he values. So, good point, but I think that he covers it.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I just had one more question.
Sure.
Let's say, I don't know if this makes sense. Let's say regarding like the Torah learning aspect, that because he says like learning is one of the aspects of this friendship.
Yeah.
Does it need to be that they learn together, or
That's
it could just be like one of them encourages the other or supports the other or whatever?
That is a good question.
Like Yisachar's villain, or it has to be like two like
Yeah, that's a really good question. Right. I mean, I guess the other question also, which we didn't ask, is let me just actually ask this here. Hold on. Where did I put the overall notes? I guess here. So question is, do they need to learn together or just learn? And then I also asked the question, likewise, do you need all three to be a good kind of friend? Or can you have, a friend who checks off only one or two boxes? Yeah, Alex?
I'm also curious if there's like if reciprocity is necessary. Like if one person is getting it and the other one's content, can they still fit in this category?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer based on personal experience. Okay. So my best friend and I, when we were in yeshiva, and for maybe we were in yeshiva together, we overlapped. We came to yeshiva together, and I think we were both there for 5 or 6 years. For the entire time we were in yeshiva, we could not learn together. Whenever we would end up fighting to the point where we would not speak to each other. And we analyzed it afterwards and realized that we were both so competitive that any learning dynamic would instantly awaken that competitiveness, and we weren't able to learn. And then what ended up happening is gradually we started, but we could, other than that, like he was total Rabbeinu Yonah and Rambam confidant, and it was mutual, So what ended up the way we got out of it was for the years after yeshiva, we would have these like long conversations, and then learning would creep in, and then it almost became a joke of like, do we refer to it as a phone call or a chavrusa? Because we weren't actually like there were times where we just were learning, but we never set up to learn, and then now we can learn together. But like I would answer based on that from experience that I think you can have a friendship like that. This is answering all the questions. Well, I don't know all the questions. Answering the first two questions. I don't think you need to learn together. I think that the Rabbeinu Yonah means that these are three types or functions within a good friendship, but you could have like, or I'll give you another example so the same thing in yeshiva is my chavrusa for most of my yeshiva years. So I believe at peak, we had multiple chavrusas throughout the day. I think at peak, we learned together for 9 hours a day. And that was together. Like all learning we did was together, but we were not friends, which is an interesting thing, meaning we did not hang out outside of yeshiva. We did not talk about personal stuff. It was only in learning. And I would consider him to be this high level friend, So I don't think you need all three. I think that either of them is good. Now, for the reciprocity, I'm tempted to say what I said for the Rambam, which is I think you don't need the reciprocity. I think you can have it in one directional thing. Like you can be turning to him for advice and as a confidant that you're not going to betray his trust, but I don't think he has to turn to you for advice. Like I think you can have it one way, just same we said for Rambam. Yeah, Alex.
I kind of have a question which might be a moot point here,
Yeah.
but I'm curious if you could have this level of friendship with someone who isn't Jewish. I would assume historically they didn't have deep friendships. Curious if you
Okay.
could still
Good question. So hold on, let me just type this here.
Didn't
talk
Yeah, I know
isn't
what you're
there
gonna say,
like
Rochelle.
I forgot his name, but I remember
Rubino
like a
Cutters and
woman.
Antoninus.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hold on a second. You can have it just for one, and it doesn't need to be symmetrical. I can never have supposed symmetrical. As we said for Rambam. Okay, and then the other question is, um, can you have this type of relationship with someone who isn't Jewish? So the answer is yes, provided that you both value the good within that function of friendship. Um, so in other words, within the learning, the mitzvos, or the advice. Okay, so Racheli was remembering Rabbeinu Kadosh, that's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, had a friendship with Antoninos, who was a one of the emperors of Rome. I don't know who it is. People think it's Marcus Aurelius because that'd be so cool. But it the someone a listener to my Stoic Jew podcast bought me a book called the Prince and the Emperors, I think, and it's all about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's relationship with all the emperors, and he concludes that it can't be Marcus Aurelius. So if you're writing a whole book on it, like I trust his judgment more than like the fan fiction like wish list, um, and I was also just reading. I'm reading this biography of the Abravanel, and he had this very very good friend, um, who was non-Jewish that they exchanged letters a lot. Who's another example? I feel like there's another example that comes to my mind. I mean, I have examples. Um, certainly for the advice, you can have you can have a friendship where you confide in each other and have advice. Again, as long as they respect your or are willing to operate within your value system, then they can give you good advice, you know. Um, and for mitzvos, I mean, one of my best friends was a Ben Noach, you know, so you can argue that that is, they're still keeping Torah, they're just keeping their mitzvos, but we weren't living the same lifestyle in the sense that like, there were a lot of differences in the lifestyle. So yeah, I think this could be with someone who's not Jewish, as long as the values are the same in the area that matters. Okay. So again, I hope this was a good like wrap up. I know we covered a lot of the same points, but I do feel like in the same way as Mishlei can take ideas that intellectually are clear, but then flesh it out in practicality, I feel like I'm more practically grounded from our discussion about friendship from the Rambam, thanks to Rabbeinu Yonah spelling it out. So that's good. So here's the thing, okay? uh, okay, so I'm not gonna record this part. No, I will. I will. Okay, so I really want to continue giving shiur on Pirkei Avos going forward. Okay, however, um, as you may have seen if you read my book recap, I have discovered um someone. This is the first time I've discovered someone who I want to relate to as a Rav. Now, the bad news is that he's been dead for 90 years. But it's Rav Kook. Okay, and I have no experience with Rav Kook, and anyone who has heard the first three people who heard this said, "Oh, you're gonna make Aliyah now," and my response to that is, it's the same thing when I tell people like that one of my Rebbeim is Bruce Lee, and they automatically assume that I'm a fan of Bruce Lee's movies. My love of Bruce Lee has nothing to do with his movies. It's his philosophy. And his philosophy became a core part of who I am as a learner and as a teacher and as a someone who lives, a human being. So I got this book, Le Nevoche Hador, which is Rav Kook's More Nevuchim, and he wrote it it's the last book he wrote before he made Aliyah. Okay, I haven't seen anything in there about Israel yet. It's his philosophy. And the way I feel about him is I feel like this is what I've been writing, and this is what I've been thinking and teaching like for the last like 10 years. I feel like he's a more mature version of where my Torah is headed. I feel like he's like a wise traveler that I'm encountering on the path who's like steps ahead of me. And the feeling that I have is not I need to I need to learn from him. I feel like I need to give sheer on him. And it's absurd because I just discovered him. And like who am I to give sheer on like someone whose Torah I barely know? But like I feel like in order to actually learn him, I need to give sheer on him. But the problem is I don't have any sheer slots. Friday morning used to be my give sheer on whatever I want slot. And but I need to do Eov then. So like I'm trying to think where should I give sheer. So I don't. So right now I'm telling myself I'm going to use my Substack to explore Rav Kook, but I really want to do it in sheer. So there is a small chance that our Thursday night sheer is going to become a I'm calling it the Rav Kook Safari series in my mind of like going on this like expedition to like find what Rav Kook has to offer. But this might become that. So I shouldn't say for better or for worse. It's gonna be for better, but like I don't know. But I also really want to teach Pirkei Avos. So like I'm just giving you a heads up. Okay, so that's what it might be. It might be maybe we'll alternate, but so that's one thing. And then the other thing I wanted to say is there's a chance I'm still in Seattle next week, and I may not give share next week. But then I'm planning to go back to New York for the week after. So yeah, check the usual channels. Oh, and if you didn't see the announcement, I'll post it in the Sheer chat. Big announcement for EO Sheer for tomorrow. Okay, so hopefully see you then. And yeah, thanks for coming, and talk to you next time. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you so much. Good job.